All right. We got Michael Proper here, decentralization, ClearPhone, expert in the decentralized world, blockchain, a lot of the stuff that I don't know so much about, but I'm excited because we've been connecting recently, and a lot of the stuff that in that world. We were supposed to be up here for a Trump event actually, and that got postponed. So hopefully we're still doing that. But you got some cool, exciting stuff going. Michael's got a background in decentralization, IT, a lot of things around systems, 30 years of experience in that world. We're sitting here in one of his offices in Salt Lake City and excited to dive into some stuff with you. And a lot of background with him. He's exited multiple companies. One notability one was to Hewlett Packard in 2008. So he's been there, done that. And that's what we like bringing on the show is people who've been there, done that, and they can talk the talk that they walked. And let's dive into it. So within decentralization, I think, and this is where I came from, is people hear a lot of these words, blockchain, crypto, decentralization. But as myself, I think, maybe just dive into what is that? Why decentralization? Where did that come from? Why are you so passionate about that world?
I personally think that decentralization is actually a natural, true and correct principle here on Earth. I think it's how our universe works. I think it's how our bodies work. You could take a microscope and a telescope and go into the cellular layer into the body, and you see intelligence in our beings and how our organs are created and how blood flows, everything. There's intelligence that happens at the cellular layer, and there's intelligence that happens if you throw a telescope on it and you look at what's happening in the universe. You don't have some centralized system that's controlling these gifts that we've been given of life. And I really believe that the core of life actually has decentralization in it. Like even the core of America, I think that the founding fathers of America gave the autonomy and the responsibilities not to a president or to a Senate or to a House, but to a sitting sheriff that's elected and serves in the local ecosystem, in the local community, in the local county. And so that responsibility was pushed down. I also look at our whole Earth. I mean, I see so many examples of the opposite of it, where people are being oppressed and controlled from systems or secret combinations that are actually doing just the opposite of giving people their own responsibility and liberty. But to have liberty, you got to have a form of responsibility. You got to be accountable to something. And so I really believe that us as individuals, as beings, as families, as communities, as everything, decentralization is such a powerful and important principle. I believe in life there's a dark and a light, a yin and a yang. This doesn't matter. I'm not talking religion. I'm not talking politics. We're here to learn. And I believe that through experience of life and even choosing the wrong sometimes, you learn and you say, wow, that really does equal that kind of negativity. And so I don't want that. So I'm going to choose this. And I really think that everything revolves around choice and decentralization, because the opposite of it, centralization and taking away choice, is actually what's happening.
Yeah, so maybe talk about that, because when I hear decentralization and centralization, talk through that. What is that? What does it look like in the real world to me or somebody else that's listening here? How is their information or whatever you're talking about here being decentralized? What is decentralized now, or is everything centralized? And how does that look and affect an individual?
No worries. I can give you a really good example. Look at the banking industry.
Give me a credit card thing.
Yeah, look at the banking industry. Exactly. Yeah. So the banking industry, you as an individual go into a bank that is centralized around centralized banking, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get an account number, and then you have someone that can actually send funds to it, or you send funds from it. Mm-hmm. The banking industry is really simple. You're either sending somebody money or you're getting money. And you're actually doing it in an account number that someone else has given you. So mm-hmm. It's a centralized system versus a decentralized system where you actually control your account. And it's the same philosophies, though. You're either adding value or you're giving. It's like a credit and debit system. So banking is a really good example of a centralized systems. You could tie into legal systems, court systems.
What would that? So let's just stay on that banking then, for example. So that it's very centralized, right? Yeah. Banks are, I'm in the lending world, right? So I deal with banks and non-banks and tech banks and all these different things, and there's a big disparity, from adoption of technology, innovation. We didn't have to, I don't think, worry about a lot of this stuff because, when the founding fathers came in there, we didn't have a lot of these problems, right? And so, there's a lot of innovation, which is great. There's a lot of tech, there's AI, there's blockchain, there's all this stuff. But is it growing too quick for us to keep up from your world in moving it from centralization to decentralization? Or what does that look for you?
I don't think it's growing too quick. I don't think it's growing quick enough. Even this morning when this is weird, but sometimes in the shower or driving, you think about things. I was thinking, Bitcoin has really taken a long time to actually get out there, but it's finally starting to have people that understand that the individual can actually own their own assets, and that technology that we've created, namely cryptography, can actually enable that to happen. And really the key is adoption of these new systems, because I really believe that the future systems that are tied to all of these actually will have elements of some form of digital transactions that have cryptography behind them. And so adoption is actually the slowest thing that I'm seeing, because the technology actually works. It really, really works.
And so talk to that. What's some of the technologies in decentralizing, and maybe layer into, some of the importance of that.
Right. So do you have your phone with you by chance?
Yeah, I do.
So all of us carry these phones, right? So it just so happens we built a business called ClearCellular that actually builds cellular phones called Clear Phones, and a couple other brands of phones. But these phones actually they're built with cryptography built into them, but any phone can actually do it. So like if you grab your phone and you grab, let's say you want to work in a jurisdiction that's like the Hawaiian Kingdom. You can download an app called the Hawaiian Life app. And multiple different jurisdictions are going to have these same types of things, whether it's America with the American app, or Mexican, Tuvaluan, Fijian, Samoan, Tongan, Saudi Arabia. All of these different environments are going to have their own apps. And really, these apps just have their local currency, but you can actually tie to every system in the world. So if you open up your phone and you open up Hawaiian Life. Just download that.
Hawaiian Life.
Yep. Okay. So whether you're on Android phone or Google phone, you can download this. You'll get 12 words. You just keep those 12 words. Okay. So and then on my side, I'm basically going to light up. You'll see that I use derived keys here, and it creates a balance. So it pulls in all the different assets. And I'll give you just a real world example. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab Hawaiian Dala. If you just grab Dala and you click on it and you say receive, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say send. And then I'm just going to scan you real fast. And this can be done with whether you're in contacts or not. So I'm basically have an interface like this where I'm going to push send. Notice his quantity. If you throw that up for our listeners, you'll see that there's 7 that he's got right there. Just come down a little bit.
There you go.
Right there. So I'm going to say send. I'm going to put my fingerprint on it. So that fingerprint with the encryption keys, with derived keys that are from the primary, 1, 2, 3, you'll see that if you flip that, you show them the 7, and then you go back so you can see that it was just received. So his balance actually just
14.
grew. So literally, we're talking real-time payments.
That's great. So how does that, so from my banking lending world, I think red flags regulation, right? Where is that at? Regulation within moving money like that as quickly as we just did.
If you just understood what just happened, you actually have an individual to an individual that's sending an asset. And do I know you? Because the regulations are 2 things: know your customers and anti-money laundering.
Right.
Those 2 are the things that the banking industry basically says, if you're going to bank and transact and connect to this centralized system, those are the 2 things that have to happen. And that's fine. That's their rules. That's their playground. And the World Bank and the Reserve Bank and the IMF and the Federal Reserve, all of them play by those same rules which stops the decentralized system to actually be effective. And that's why the adoption thing is so low. But when you look at what we just did,
Right.
real-time transaction, and in that jurisdiction, the Hawaiian Kingdom, there's actually no fees, but there's real assets that tie behind it. So that asset is linked with $1 US and 1 Hawaiian dollar that then also is backed by real world assets like gold and silver. So when we think about it, it's doing everything that all the centralized systems aren't. They're not real time, they're slow, they're expensive, and they're centralized, and they don't work. Like the Reserve Bank has actually gone off. The Fed wire has gone down like 7-8 hours. Like it's like these systems never go offline. When I say never, I'm talking because the way that consensus and validator nodes work, you can have 70% of them go offline and they still actually can function. Think about that.
Yeah.
Actually, it's the opposite. 30% can go offline, 70% stay up. It's actually like 33% can go off. But the point is what just happened was you don't go into a bank and get a bank account that can be taken from you, or it can be levied. Or in the United States, over the last 40 years or so, they have these things called UCC laws. So these UCC laws get adopted state by state.
Very familiar with UCC.
I mean, so if you understand, and so the controls around how UCC works, it takes that centralized control and has measurements around how it can be centrally, not just controlled, but also deducted. So if we back up, Biden with basically a executive order in, I want to say 2022, he approved programmable money. And programmable money will be digital, but it can be taken, or it can be lost, or it can say, if you don't do this or think this or act this or follow this, you can't buy this, or you can't travel to that region and use these funds. That's programmable money.
So how do they jump in and do that currently in digital money? What would be digital money now versus decentralized digital money, we'll say in quotes?
When I'm, in my opinion, I'm going to unpack that in a big way. When you say they, I believe they are a combination of a bunch of secret combinations in different industries. You know, it could be healthcare, it could be finance, it could be pharmaceutical, it could be technology, it could be oil. And all of these different folks have worked together over the years to say, hey, let's actually do this with this country. And let's get this person in power. All we have to do is control the voting systems to do it. And they've done it in America just like they've done it in other parts of the world. You don't believe me? I won't mention names here, but the point is they basically centralize that control so they can take over reserve banks and Federal Reserves and other elements to create money, to then put controls on the money. Now you control the people. So that is centralization, because usually when you actually centralize something, there's power to it. And when you have voting behind it, usually people will vote for the people that give away something for free. That's a normal thing. But I would say that America's different. The majority of Americans are actually just not out for a handout. They're out for what America stood for. That's why we got Statue of Liberty.
Yep.
But with
American
liberty,
dream.
exactly, that Statue of Liberty comes with responsibility. And without responsibility and having some accountability, we can't be free. We can't choose. And that's the difference between centralization and decentralization. So when I pull up one of these cards, I say, like, this card is attached to a bank account, and this card can be taken, the bank account can be taken, and it's like, how does that work? And when you really understand, like you yourself, you come from the finance world, you understand UCC. UCC is the law that actually applies that in real time.
Right.
And so when you start understanding that, you start saying, well, what if I lost my bank account number? Well, you go back to your bank and you get a bank account. You get the number and they give it to you, and you can then give it to somebody else and they can transact. But that system is broken. Here's why. Just like how these credit cards work. So the front 16 digits here, and then the number on the back, I'll even show it. I'll share it with everybody. People say, why would you give away your number? What's the difference? Yeah, literally. What's the difference when I give you that number and that number for this bank account? Well, it's like, well, you just gave away some credentials and people can go and use that. Well, yeah, you're right. And that is why these systems are flawed, and that's why they will all be replaced. Credit cards are a problem of decades ago. I mean, it's the stupidest thing. So think about if the number on the back was actually like 12 words or a long hexagraphic key, and no one ever got it. No one ever saw it. That's basically what blockchain or Bitcoin or decentralization is you have a public number and a private number, and you just don't share both of them at the same time. But you as the individual need to be responsible to not give out that number. And that hexagraphic key actually turns into 12 words. If you just don't lose those 12 words, like when you set up that wallet, you got 12 words, you're the only one. And believe it or not, he actually linked it with some biological data of you. So in my case, I link it with a fingerprint. In your case, you actually had already linked it with your face with Apple. I don't believe that's the right thing. I think future generations are going to figure out that our face, our being, our body, our genealogy, our names are very sacred.
Right.
And in the digital world, you just don't go and spill them everywhere. And in the future, imagine if you had an ID, whether digital or physical, that actually was just your first name and someone had to scan something to validate who you were, but you could actually verify who you were better than the centralized systems today. And so when I talk about decentralization, the first place that everything starts is around the individual and around identity. So if you can control your identity and you can actually, like we're sitting here in August of 2024, and we just had within the last 10 days, 2 weeks, every social security number stolen.
Like, I know I get way more alerts recently on my Experian monitoring than I do normally. And it's more frequent every time.
What happens now that they've all been checked? Oh, well, we're going to give you this creditor monitoring thing and you're going to be just fine. Don't worry about identity fraud. That's not the problem. The problem is us as humans going together and putting all of our data, trusting like the social security system. And I'm not saying government's bad. There's a place for government. There really is, but it should be serving the people instead of controlling the people. And when we really look at it, it's like, do we really have a voice? Do you really think you have a voice? I don't care what country you live in, Canada, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, it doesn't matter. These voting systems have actually they've been compromised. Here we are, you and I were going to connect with Trump last night.
Yep.
Here in Utah, wonderful, just it's like 8 years since he's been here. And this is a man that I believe that can do things that other presidents haven't done because of just what he does, right? And our hope is that certain things can change, but even if he gets in, which I don't believe they'll allow to happen, I hope I'm absolutely wrong. I hope the voting systems are honest. I hope that people actually have a real voice. I don't care who gets elected as long as there's honesty. The problem is there really isn't because there's no transparency. It's the same thing in the finance world, the banking world, everything. There's no transparency. And that's why decentralization and these new financial systems will actually win because everything is honest. Every transaction is actually public, but they don't know who the people are. Like I just sent you that asset. The whole world sees that, and it can never go down or be taken away. When I say never, in the technology world, so I've spent over 30 years in it, and to say the word never is a very absolute that usually you don't ever say. Right. But it's because how these systems are actually, they use, and all it is an application on some type of x86 or ARM-based system in some part of the world that says this transaction happened and I validate it and you validate it and this validates it, and then they just don't go away.
So what's the big hindrance then of slowing down the decentralization? Because I think a lot of people, for me, for example, right? So I have Apple Pay, I have all my cards. I don't need my wallet other than my ID right now, right?
No, you need your phone.
I need my phone.
Yeah.
Right.
So think about this. What if I said that a prediction is just like this? Your phone, so your digital world, what we could look at as a phone, your physical world, like you and I are physical, and your biological world. Now, what I'm saying by biological is like your fingerprints, your face scan, photos of you, all of these things are biological, as well as a PCR test that you take up your nose when you have some supposed test that you need to go and take. When they link those, they're actually linking your DNA, your digital footprint, and then they link your financials. So they're actually going to take,
and medical.
Yeah, you got it. They're going to take basically, let's say this is an ID and let's say this is a payment. They're going to link them together, and then they're going to say, you actually have to download this app, and that app is going to link to one of these devices, and then they're going to know everything. When they link all three of those things, that programmable money that I talked about in the future is going to absolutely become reality.
So what can people be doing now? I mean, the decentralization is not there yet, right? but what are some things, like just practical things people can be doing to protect themselves? I know Clear Phone and Clear companies and that stuff is all out there, but for the day-to-day person, is just like, oh no, that's not good. I'm scared of my data getting out there. It may be too late. There may be all stuff out there, but adding new apps, adding new things, tying all that information into a startup company, for example, who knows where that storage of those servers are.
Well, I think we don't have to look very far to really understand that, because they're already doing this in Nigeria. The same exact thing is happening in Nigeria. The people are starting to figure out, oh, my payments and my identity are actually the same. Why can't your identity card actually have a
list of card payment methods?
You got it.
Yeah.
So they linked those together, and people were actually okay with that. It wasn't the end of the world. But when they started forcing you to link it to your cell phone, then they said that's not right, because now you can actually control us. Because when you link it to our cell phone, now you know where we are, what we're doing, how we're doing. And not only that, what we're saying. And in most cases, and this is where it gets freaky, to the point of using technology to actually understand what you're thinking. And some people may say, well, yeah, I actually thought about that traveling.
I think we just went off there. Sorry.
Go ahead. Shit. You're okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. We'll get it.
You're still live streaming, aren't you?
Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay. This is how it works.
We got people.
You just need battery?
Yeah.
Want this one right here?
Yeah.
So this is our first
first.
it's a podcast that's live, and he's literally flown across the world, so to speak, from the Dominican Republic.
Might as well be.
Yeah. Bringing all these cameras and gear. Usually we don't do all of it, but it'll be neat to kind of see how this all comes together. So, but what we were talking about was Nigeria. So in Nigeria, people are finally starting to figure out the financial payment and the identity coming together, and then they're saying, well, you need to download this app and link it to it. And we're talking many, many millions of people did it, and then they finally start figuring out that we understand what they're doing. They're controlling it. And so what the people did was they stopped doing it. And then the government said to the cellular companies, all of these phone numbers that haven't registered, if they don't register on this date, turn their cellular service off.
And that was Nigeria.
This is Nigeria.
Okay.
This is right now. This is like real time.
Wow.
And so then the cellular carriers, because the government's in control of it, cellular carriers turned them off. Like in America, we literally have 3, maybe 4 cellular carriers: Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T. Those are the core, right?
Mm.
Any of the ones that are tied to that are reselling those types of services. And it happens in other parts of the world. Rogers in Canada, Vodafone, Telstra, Optus in Australia. So they have centralized control over the communication systems, what we become so beholden of, right? And then you keep digging into that and say, well, if the people in Nigeria had their cellular phone numbers turned off, what do? Do they comply? So millions more then started complying. And then people said, you know what, this isn't right. And some people actually stand up and say, we're actually gonna die over this. This is not right. I'm not saying,
you're fighting an uphill battle now. Really. When you lose that 80% that cared, and now you're left with the 2% that really care. They're now fighting an uphill battle when you say, fine, whatever.
And but they didn't even get to that. They didn't get to that percentage, because the people in Nigeria came together and said, you know what, we're not going to have this. They rioted in the streets, and I'm not saying riot and burn, and that's not what I'm saying has to happen, but that's what they did. And then they actually got smart, and they hacked into the database that actually manages all this stuff. Because remember, we've been in technology for 30 plus years, centralized technology to see the flaws in it for 15 years, had a really solid run, created a whole industry, $256 billion industry with Intel and blah, blah, blah. And in 2008 saw, this is wrong. Decentralization is the future. So for 15 years, we've been building decentralized systems, like literally put over $30 million of our own hard-earned money into it, not third party, not some, venture fund or some debt. We literally worked hard to build profitable businesses that focus on enabling decentralization in the cellular world, because we know this is reality. So these folks basically go in and hack into the centralized Nigerian database. And then that's what started saying, oh, well, Well, if they already got out the data, then it doesn't really matter because now everybody can do it.
So did they hack it to prove a point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Not only prove a point, but if multiple people can actually have the data now, and that's why open source and open standards are absolutely imperative for the future. And everything that we do is open. It's free to the world. We call it living the law, consecration and software development. Nobody owns it. Nobody controls it, but everybody can benefit from it. And if you're honest with what's happening, but you take your identity back, that is the way to solve us and free us as individuals.
Yeah. And I can see that in every facet, every industry, every part of your life.
Healthcare, insurance, banking. You know, I don't care if it's title companies. I don't care if it's mortgage companies. It could be simple as, you know, travel. You know, the ability for you to travel and verify who you are, but still be private. Like I don't push conspiracy theories, but we just had a plane go down and there were some people on it that were pretty important people. And it was like, how did they know they were all on that plane? Like, it's data, and we are tracked and traced to a level that we can't even understand.
Oh yeah, and we've talked about this before. You know, so you're passionate about that. I mean, you have children and things of that. What do you foresee? Say nothing does get decentralized. Where do you see 10, 20, 30 years from now?
I think America just went through a war internally, and the war was around the same topic, slavery. Because what I see in the future is massive slavery and control like we cannot imagine. Like,
give us some examples of some of that stuff you're most worried about, that soonest, I think soonest coming, that you see more about than stuff further down the road.
I think life is so beautiful and so abundant, and this earth we got 8 billion people on it, and people talk about, you know, too many people and talk about how do we get rid of it. No, it's not that. This earth can provide so much for us. We're not even tapping into, I believe, 10% of it. Like, there's more food. All we need as humans is some basic things. We need to have substance, you know, air, oxygen, clean air, I should say, clean water, the sun. Those basic elements can actually produce not only health in us at the cellular layer, but also health and nutrients. Like how these are real leaves. How do they grow? Well, there's sunlight in this room, and the photosynthesis that comes in to feed this. And as crazy as this is, that is decentralization. How does that leaf know? And then a mango grow, and then we take it, so the point is food, and that's why they're going after food. That's why they're going after water. That's why they're going after power. And people may think, well, they're not doing that. All I'd say is go do your research, because centralized monocropping of food, centralized control and distribution and supply chain, those are all things we saw break down in this thing called COVID. And literally it impacted humanity. I think in many ways it impacted us in a good way. You know, we started, well, in some ways things went crazy, but we see the value of family more. Yep. We see the value of life and time. We see the value of choice. Like some people that made a choice to get vaccinated, and now they say, I wish I didn't do that. You know, it's like that choice needs to be that individual's. And that, right. So choice is such a massive, important part of it. And I really believe if we fast forward, we're talking control and slavery. But, you know, you said, I really do care as a father. I really, really do. And it's not just about, do they have food? Do they have power? Do they have water? Who cares, right? But when it comes down to it, 61 million people died in the Second World War. And those were usually some white dude and some other white dude. And I don't want to be racist because we're one world, one family. But usually it's two crockety old people that basically say, this is how it's going to come together. And then young people go and kill each other that don't even know each other.
That had no control, no say.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wrong. And so for me, I've got 5 amazing boys that are strong, and they would be drafted into this garbage. Because I believe that not just rumors of wars and wars are coming, but I really believe that that's another way to create chaos and confusion is through these wars. I mean, I look at what's happening in Ukraine and in Israel as terrible, but at the same time, it's just the start of what's coming.
Right. Yeah. So I want to zoom out a little bit now. I appreciate you going through that decentralization. I learn more and more every time I I hear about it, and it's enlightening and it's inspiring, and it's also there's some fear too and behind it. So zooming out here, you've had successful exits before. You're working on the Clear companies now. ClearCellular being one of those. What are some of those hindrances or things that you've learned you've been wildly successful in multiple different, all around this thesis and technology and centralization, but what are some things that you've learned, big milestones that really changed the way you thought about things as you were growing these companies, exiting? What if you can think of maybe one or two things that kind of help some of the, younger entrepreneurs that see what you're doing and they're like, man, that seems like a lot, right? And what is it really? If you look back, what does that take to get into things that make an impact, that make money, that you've realized over those years? You've been doing this for 30 years, right? So what could help some other people out there?
I think helping other people, the simplest thing is believe in yourself. There's no difference from you or anybody else out there. And the knowledge that you've been gaining over your lifetime to be able to use the power of choice to do something. A lot of other people are probably thinking the same thing, but not everybody's acting on it. And usually the people that act on it, then they can figure out how to execute through it. It's like when we started this whole podcast, like, let's just start. And it's like, you just believe in yourself, understand that there's no difference between any of us. And the basics for me, if you take time and space out of the equation, everything makes sense. And time is one of the most valuable assets that we've been given. And our bodies to have health and the ability, like you just traveled halfway around the world, like in the last 24 hours. It's so cool.
I'm feeling it. not as much as before. I'm a little better shape, but yeah.
But you got vitality, you got the ability to travel, these are such gifts that we've been giving. And so I think appreciation and gratitude is such an important role for humanity.
Yeah.
And for the individual.
Yeah. And I haven't talked about this, but yeah, I was down in Dominican, and, gratitude. I'm in my hotel room, taking a shower this morning, and I got hot water, and we just got done serving, these communities down in Santiago, Dominican Republic. And it's just, it's sad, but they are happy, they're happy. And it's like, man, how are these people so happy and joyous, but they have nothing,
That would be that key. You think about it. We could have everything we physically want in the world, but if we're forced to do something with our time, like they're not forced. They wake up when they want to. Family's a core. They also have choices, so they get to. We all are one world, one people, and the sooner that we recognize, like you were around people that had dark skin all day. Mm-hmm. For a long time.
And I wouldn't say necessarily they have choice. I think they have choices, but there's also other things at play that eliminate a lot of those choices, right? That are out of people's control. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here a little bit too, is centralization is out of most people's control.
You look at the bank accounts within the centralized system, over 70% of this world does not have access to a normal, simple bank account. But with decentralization, everyone can. And all they have to do is save 12 words.
Yeah. And never say those 12 words to anybody.
Well, even with these systems, if it's really architected correctly, which is really the core competency of what we've had over the last 30 years, it's really understanding systems and architectures and the ability to be able to take a 12-word key phrase or hex graphic key and link it with something that you are, like your fingerprint or your face, or because somebody could take the 12 words, but they still can't do anything with them. But if they actually, so like, let's say I lost my phone.
Yeah, that's what I was. So like when I've signed up for, say, crypto accounts, right, and wallets, and you get a phrase, and you save that, and I say screenshot it. Well, what if somebody gets a hold of my phone and sees the screenshot, or they, hack something and get those words? What is the protection then?
So that's the key of like. Even the app that you pulled down, it uses a third-party element bound with that key to create what we call the master key. and then it uses derived keys for everything else. So for our listeners,
As I say, for everyone out there, what's a key?
So a key is actually the 12 words.
Okay.
So the 12 words actually come off of what they call a hexagraphic cryptographic key, which is usually a string of, sometimes it's 24 words that ties to a longer string, but that string of complex numbers and signs is basically what is created dynamically. And then that converts into 12 words. Then the 12 words link to you as an individual, something physical for you.
Okay.
And then we take that and we link it to what we call 5-factor authentication. So something you have, something you do, something you are in a certain space and time. So you link all of those things together. For instance, if we wanted to, let's say I want to share a screen here real fast. And let's say I want to log into this. This is a Republic, right? Let's say.
I know people listening to the podcast, watching the podcast aren't seeing
they're
this,
not seeing any of this?
Well, I don't think they are, but either way, we'll get some screenshots and
Okay.
some other stuff out there for people to really, if they want to dive in and learn more about
So
this.
what I just showed our listeners, I used the Life app, which are different Life apps, and I logged in through a QR code with 5-factor authentication. And now I can basically come in and do different things, whether I want to register a vehicle, whether I want to get certified or registered or do different things. I can literally come in and automatically do it. Another side of it that's also pretty relevant and valuable in this ecosystem is something simple as voting. So like, let's say we want to come in and vote. Let's say I really like, and I'll just do this out of respect because this Robert gave up this last
I think
week.
you need to update something.
Yeah, something, yeah, exactly. So this is an example. If we were running true systems that were around everyone seeing what are the votes, where are they coming from, but not who's doing it. So there's privacy around the individual. You notice that actually just jumped up. That's as simple as voting needs to really have to be.
Yeah.
And it does, and you can literally prove, hey, are these guys in the region and did they actually vote? And you can actually link it. If you want to link it to voters, that's ID, that's fine. But it's just a game. Like everybody, someone comes across the border, they basically say, hey, and we're one world, one people. Someone comes across and says, well, why are you coming? Well, I'm coming for a job. Well, you need a job. Here's a social security number. You have a social security number. You need to go create a bank account, or you need to go get an ID before you create a bank account. To get your ID, you go get a driver's license. You get a driver's license. They register your voting. So literally all the voting, all the driver's licenses, all the citizenship, they're pulling it all together. So it's like, okay, we got one big melting pot. Call it what it is. Do they actually physically reside in that location? You can say, have you spent half your time in XYZ county or state? And if so, the technology, exactly what I just did, can do it. And it's totally transparent. Everyone in the world just saw that transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I really feel bad for this Joey guy, or I really love the job he's done, and I want to vote for him. So I come in here, I just literally go and scan it. Again, 5-factor authentication, something I am, something I have, something I do in a space and time. And I just voted for Joey. I just moved my vote for Robert over to Joey, and the world sees it. And at a certain date and time, it locks down. No one else can vote. And the results are transparent, not only real time.
Is that the blockchain portion of this?
Yeah, so you got it. So there are blockchain, which is really just a bunch of servers that have applications that validate things that are happening. And that's really the value. Like people talk about Bitcoin being the first blockchain application. Well, it wasn't. It was 12 years prior to that with the same guy that's mentioned inside the Bitcoin white paper that actually did genealogy-based stuff out of the same state that we're in right now. Like it's all genealogy-based stuff. It's identity. It's who we are, where we come from. And that really matters. Like when you have kids, I promise you some of these fights, because I didn't have this desire and passion for this until I got married, then had kids. And then these different compelling events are like, and then you watch parents and grandparents pass away and it's our turn. And it's like, we can't leave this world the way that we're seeing it. When you and I were born, and maybe, I don't know how much age difference we are, but
not much, I'm sure.
I learned on typewriters how to type. There was no computers in my high school.
Maybe a little younger.
There was no internet. There was no
No,
cell
so
phones.
I was right. There's a rare group of people who grew up that saw the old world and were young enough to get into the new world, right? That saw both the pros and cons of being able to run around as a kid on your bicycle, or go trade sporting cards or go play basketball, versus there's kids now that grow up and it's all video games, social media. I don't think any of that's bad. I think it's just the world is changing, and and it's busy and it's fast, and so I'm in that generation there in the middle that's kind of was on both, right? I mean, we went from my first phone in 8th grade had Snake, and that's it, right? And then we were the first class to have an iPad, but that was like sophomore year, right? And then everyone coming up after that all had iPads. They all had cell phones. They all had all this digital world. And so some of the nostalgic things that people value from the old world, right, pre-internet, pre-cell phones, has been lost, I think, a little bit. And with that is privacy, and security, and things that we knew how safe things were before. You didn't have to. There's a lot of things you never had to worry about that now you have to worry about. But there's only a select segment of people that understand both sides of that give us a chance to make an impact. Because I think, to your point, you get too far down the road of figuring this stuff out. You have people who, kids now that are in the world doing, entrepreneurs and starting companies and innovating, that don't know what they don't know. They didn't see that, right? And they didn't see how peaceful and stress-free and things, and I don't have to monitor my credit all the time. I don't have to, have all this stuff just to make sure I'm safe.
Think about the people in the Dominican Republic. Do you think they worry about credit?
No.
You think they worry about some of these basic things?
That's a good point.
And I believe that the system that we're actually in what they would call a first world country actually has a lot of the slavery environments around it, these controls. And for us to actually have peace and joy and freedom and happiness, I really believe that we need to be responsible as individuals and then take some of the conveniences that we've been given into our own hands. And I'm not saying we go out and riot in the streets and burn things down, but a simple thing around the way that you actually provide identity. So an ID, a license, whether it's a license plate or a driver's license or a passport, any of these things needs to be a simple human right to have your privacy attached to it. So they can see your face and they can see your first name, but they don't need to see your middle name and your last name or your date of birth or your social security number unless they request it and you validate it, and then you can pull that validation or verification back. It really is just that simple. It's a human right to have your own identity be you and to be able to travel this beautiful earth. And I believe by what they're doing in May of next year, they will literally implement Real ID. They've pushed the deadlines out 3 times already. This deadline won't be pushed out. This deadline in May of 2025, they will force anyone that wants to travel, because you can't go into government buildings unless you have a Real ID. And an airport,
after May,
you got it.
Yeah.
And an airport will be considered that, as well as a bank. So you can't even go in to create a bank account without a Real ID.
So what it talks about the Real ID, because I got it right when it came out, because I heard that, and it's like the same thing. You see people driving around with a year expired tags. I'm not usually that guy, and so Real ID I went and got right away. But I'm like, why did I? It's been pushed out years, and I never really had.
You
to do
don't see anything unique or different about it. You have your old ID and your new ID. Just one has this new unique little star on it.
Right.
What's really happened behind the scenes is exactly what we've been talking about. There's actually a cryptographic key that is tied to each one of these now. And when you actually travel and you ask what people can do, and you did it on your way here. So when you go to put in your ID at an airport, and then they actually take a photo of you, tell them that you want to opt out. When they actually, and not only that, but there's other things in those processes, and see what happens, see what the next step is. because it's through convenience that people give away their privacy and they become the product. And when you become the product, it's not just a product for people to market to, but in the future, you're going to be the slave. You're going to be the one that's actually, and people may think, well, no, but the net of all of this is Real ID, the system that they insert that identity. They're like, I don't know if you just traveled, whether it's your passport. Your passport's been doing this for a long time.
Anymore now, you actually, I don't know if it's facial recognition or what, but sometimes you don't, like if I remember right, there's been times where I didn't need so I use Clear at the airport, and they just let you go through.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're not, I didn't show my ID at all. I didn't show my ID at all coming here.
You just put your fingerprints on it or your eyes. Yeah. That's it. See, and that's what I'm talking about around, it's really convenient and I can actually just get through the line. So I'll give away my privacy because I can just get through this line faster.
I think that's where a lot of people are.
Yeah, but
with everything.
It's that right there. That convenience right there is all we have to do is think a little bit different and say, no, I understand what's actually being done. It's like, do you play chess?
I have.
Like
I'm not
chess,
an avid player, but
chess is such a wonderful game because it thinks us to actually look a couple steps in the future. Well, if I move there, they can do this and this. Really, what we're doing is we're playing a big game of chess with secret combinations that have taken over systems and centralized them. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so to decentralize it, all we have to do is say, hey, well, how can I actually take that back? Well, I can opt to not be a part of that centralized system. They can't take a photo of my face with my ID that I just plugged into their, and when you plug it into their system, it's a cryptographic system. The problem is they control the centralized keys to it. So now they know cryptographically that ID is actually linked to you.
So how would it be done differently? In that scenario, right? You slide your ID in and they have its cryptographic key, but it's tying into a database that they control where they save information.
So the difference is
tie them together.
Imagine if the centralized database is not controlled, and imagine if you do not divulge your last name and your middle name, but your first name and your photo can actually be there so that whoever needs to look at and verify it, they can do that. But do you really think they look at the whole name and the spelling and all the you can say, well, that's their job, they're supposed to. But I would argue when people start understanding these systems, they don't even care about it. They link that thing, it looks up all the databases. Can you travel? Are you on this list? Did you do this? All of those different elements. And they're literally, this is just the start. Once they link your ID to finances and then to the biologic, because when you're using Clear, you've already linked it. You've linked your retina, you've linked your fingerprints. And in this decentralized world, you own your own data. You own your own bio. You own your own health. Because it's not just going to stop with fingerprints and facial recognition or or your opticals. It's going to go into a point where they'll communicate with your body through yes or no questions in real time. I'm talking communicating with the human body through here's a question to your body. Yes. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask this next question. Think about machine learning and artificial intelligence on top of the ability to communicate with your body. This is not hypothetical. This is absolutely 100% real.
I just made an investment in a company doing molecular AI, right, within the body and genomes and doing that within medicine. And so it's like, it's there. Yeah. We're there, right? And all it takes is a connecting between the body and that data.
PGX.
And that AI. Yeah.
There's a PGX stuff that you're messing with?
No.
Yeah. So there's a beautiful world in health, but
the company's Terra Therapeutics. So NVIDIA just invested side by side with NVIDIA.
I believe that when we actually, because for instance, some people on our team, Richard Dick is his name, wonderful man. He actually helped create the policy, wrote the policy for what HIPAA is, Health Information and Portability and Privacy Act. And it was implemented absolutely the opposite of what it was supposed to do. The individual is supposed to be able to take their own identity and portably take it to, I'm supposed to go to this obstetrician or that OGBYN or that family practitioner or that dentist, and I'm taking my data, letting them plug into it. They're taking an x-ray of my teeth. They're taking an x-ray of my blah, blah, blah. That data should be stored and owned by me. And then the next one can actually go do it. It's just the opposite. You literally fill out forms and give your data there and think that their systems are actually going to help store it better than you can.
Right.
So decentralized systems puts the individual in charge of their own data. where they're going online, how their financial transactions are working, what bills they're paying, what their family members are, instead of putting it in Equifax and TransUnion and a social security system and a cellular company. Every one of those have all been compromised.
So what do you see? Because thinking through this from a business standpoint, right? There's going to be, if this goes through and we decentralization from businesses that are doing marketing and advertising to people not knowing who anyone is anymore, right? That's going to change a lot of things.
It's actually going to change it for the better. Think about this. Instead of you giving away your name and your data to a company like Facebook and Google that then have someone like Toyota that pays for it, but Toyota never pays you. They never get your direct loyalty. Mm-hmm. But imagine that's different. You actually get paid directly from Toyota based upon them knowing more about you than even the centralized systems can know about you. But they never know your name.
So it's not tied to you. So they have all this information about your businesses and your bank accounts and
think about
your health, but they can't damage you because there's no name.
You got it. So think about it this way. Toyota basically says, I just want to get in front of people that have X in their garage, their car's this years old, they said this and they maybe said this or searched this, maybe they're looking for a 4-door sedan and they have this kind of financial transactions, they have this much cash in the bank, they have this much credit score. They're looking for that type of an individual, and they would pay the individual directly and not know their name versus pay them indirectly and know their name.
Right.
And it even gets better. Let's just take name out of it. It's like, if you actually popped up on your screen and says, Toyota wants to pay you $20 to look at an ad, would you?
Yeah.
And would you have a little bit more loyalty towards Toyota if that ad actually appealed to you?
Yeah. Knowing that the Google or Facebook or whoever I saw the ad through is getting a ton of money.
So think about it. That makes
a lot of sense.
This is your phone today, this Apple phone, right?
Yeah.
So think about a device that you actually pay money for to track you. And you don't own the device and you don't own the data. Yeah. That's your reality today versus a device that actually pays you to own your own identity. Yeah. Think of just those two paradigms.
Yeah.
And that's one form, and that's just one of the businesses within the Clear companies that focuses on decentralization, because I am convinced that every single application that we have, I don't care if it is a bowling alley software to a title company, manufacturing company, any software that's built is going to have a form of decentralization in the future. And it could just be an authentication thing.
Right.
It's like how many of us used to just use username and passwords to set up an account, but now we use Facebook or Google or whatever to log into it. And that's actually centralization. But what if you could actually log in? Like our listeners watched how long it took me to log in and then to vote. It's real time. Mm-hmm. Like I could even come into that same system. I don't remember which one it was.
It was super fun. When I got that, when you sent those funds, I was like,
real time. Wow.
Yeah, because we deal in the payments world, and
that's not, how often have you ever seen a real time payment that has no fees, no government, and no banks?
Never, no fees usually.
And not only that, but grab your same phone, go ahead and open that up. And what we're going to do is we're just going to come in and we're just going to say, log in. Like what if you logged into your own ecosystem instead of go ahead and just scan that bottom right. I don't know if did you go to the app?
Oh, and from the app.
Go to the app. So he's using, in this particular instance, Hawaiian Life.
And scan.
Yep, bottom right. Okay. There you go. So he's literally, it uses 5-factor authentication to log him in. Did it approve it? It should look at your face. So it did it. So you're done. Yeah. So he can literally imagine how many of us actually register our cars or get a marriage license or a birth certificate, or maybe have like a business. Like let's say you want to create a business.
Okay, I didn't get what you're doing. So you were getting me a login access to here.
You just logged in.
With that that one scan on from my data, my credentials.
You got it. Before you actually logged in, and you could see this company that you logged into.
So it's almost like a accelerated version of passkeys, which are kind of where's passkeys into this?
It's passkeys are actually centrally owned. Let's say not 2-factor authentication. Let's say you got 3-factor authentication. Who owns those factors?
Person.
No, it's Google that actually does.
Yeah, the company that provided that passkey to you.
The goal is to get, and that's why the Clear companies, that's why we call it Clear. There is no central system to it. There's no center to it. It's totally clear and transparent.
So like I use NordPass for my passwords, and now they're adding the passkeys, right? You could do it through, you have the option, right? Do you want Apple to generate the passkey, or do you want Nord passwords, which is kind of like a 1Password solution to create the passkey? But you're saying that it's now in another database.
You got it.
It's now centralized again somewhere else.
So you have to trust Nord,
right?
Because if your master private key that's also encryption is compromised there, then all of your passwords are compromised. And so in this ecosystem, it's not just can you log into a system, but when you log in, like with these apps, and this is why ClearPhones are actually valuable. When you actually come into these different apps, they have like that Clear ID actually pulls in all your passwords and usernames. So you can actually log into systems that you normally have username and passwords with, but you do it with your fingerprint.
Right. So
you're actually in a scan. And I believe in the future, a lot of these centralized systems that actually care about the individual, all they have to do is layer on this 5-factor authentication, that then they log in and create an account that the centralized system doesn't know who they are.
Right.
And this is a really key point, because when you come in and let's say you want to create a business, go ahead and just scan this with that same process. So what's going to happen is he's going to create a derived key from the original key that is unique just to him. So notice this box on the left. So that was successful. Notice how fast all this is as well. So that key ties to this business based upon you. Machine learning and artificial intelligence can't follow this. So it's literally building. And not only that, but you could go and create.
I mean, it's way quicker than any chat GPT request. All of them take longer than what we just did there.
You got it. Like you've already created a business here. Let's jump into this business. And the same thing applies if you want to create a digital asset that associates to it. Same type of thing. This digital asset could represent something like an investment in that company. Or IP, a patent, or real estate, or a car, or anything. Like you could have, today you have businesses that may hold assets or bank accounts or others, but this is a system. Like if you actually come and view this page, this is what you set up a long time ago. It shows,
so is this something people can have access to? Can other people get access to?
Anybody can do anything we're talking about. Like they just go to whatever phone you're running. If it's an Android phone or Google phone, go download Hawaiian Life, which is the jurisdiction that this is talking about. This particular interface we're logged into is American based, and there is a difference between a Hawaiian and American, which is a whole nother conversation. But this stuff is real time. This is not hypothetical. This is real, and it truly can give you your identity back. But the question is, do the credit agents care? Do the banks care? Do the military, do the law enforcement care? Because it's not just the stuff that's.
Oh, you're fighting. I can see it. I can see you're fighting all that.
Like literally, you go and like if you come into here.
I think if people pivot, just my opinion, but I think if people pivot their mindset away from control and to how can we make everything better for all parties, right? Because this stuff like this can make it easier for government and police and other.
Totally.
It's not. I think a lot of the confusion is they're like, oh, we're not going to know a criminal or something like that, right?
Like when you come into these, for instance, I'm just going to go in. I'm going to literally do this real time. I'm going to go ahead and log into this Hawaiian ecosystem. So I'm just opening up an app. I'm going to scan this guy. This is going to log into a system here, and I'm going to click on this car. So I've already added a car. This literally is a car that I drove here in today. This little license plate is tied to it. I can come and scan it. Anybody, they don't need apps or anything. They can literally just come. An officer can walk up and scan it. The difference is it can't be scanned by the cameras that are actually on the freeways. So it's not only tracking, surveilling the individual, but if you notice, it pulls up information. So an officer can come and say,
this is cool.
I actually want to know, are you insured? Are you registered? Is this financed? Do you own it? Who can drive it? What if like for instance, here's a registration. They can have it at their fingertips, but it's not a part of their centralized systems. When we look at, for instance, license plates, these are, or even driver's licenses, these are associations that are private, cross-country. Canada, US, they run a system. Europe runs a system. Asia runs a system. But the question is, what are they tracking and surveilling? And it comes down to who will actually control it.
Right.
And that's why in in the United States of America, the sheriffs, most of them understand this, especially constitutional sheriffs. They understand what their role is, and they embrace this type of tech.
Is this being adopted anywhere yet?
This is being rolled out. There's particular environments that I believe, like for instance, sovereign environments like the Hopis.
Mm-hmm.
Like these guys were here way before America. Why can't you register your car in Hopi land and actually have an opt-out capability?
Yeah.
So there's people that will actually say enough is enough. I'm tired of being a part of the system, and I'm going to do something that is different. And when more and more people actually start doing it, it's going to come up more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And so federal agencies, state agencies, police agencies, but the sheriffs and the sheriff associations, particularly constitutional sheriffs, they get this and they love it, and they support it. Now, not a lot of police officers or police stations would today, but it's just because of awareness.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is for the last 2 years, we basically went around the world, primarily focused in, and the whole world is basically made up of about 8 billion people in different bioregions. And these bioregions have unions that tie to them. So this smallest one, the Pacific Union, we met with 28 countries, and literally 7 or 8 of them are rolling this out as a standard. So these things countrywide will actually be a standard. Not only that, but it's like, hey, you want to get a mortgage with a Fijian dollar? And the Reserve Bank of Fiji actually authorized the bank to issue that.
Right.
Because you can actually see what happened. You can see, did somebody make a payment? Did they miss a payment? You can see, instead of.
No, I mean, I just think about it from the world of, ACH, right? Or having to validate funds in accounts. There's so much fraud around waiting 7 days or 30 days, to see if that clears or if it didn't clear.
And it's all games.
And then now it's all, yeah.
I've been in the IMF buildings. I've been in the meetings, days and days, them trying to indoctrinate these people.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, the IMF stood in front of these different countries and said, anti-money laundering and know your customer. If you want to do anything in crypto or digital, anything, this is what you have to do. And when they understand really what the digital systems are, it does both of those in spades. Fraud and forensics are you can see everything that happened. Like if I had a $20 bill, could I actually know who has touched it by the time someone was created?
No.
With this system, you can see all of it.
Yeah.
How long did they have it? Did it move around? Was it cut in half? I mean, everything is totally.
So you're
honest.
layering that. I mean, I think the most common thing, at least for me, and I think other people, they're getting aware of like NFTs or crypto, is that blockchain sequence of a piece of art, right? You get a digital piece of art, who created it, it wasn't fraudulent because it's, if they want to put that out there that they're the creator, that's the creator, and you see every transaction, right? And so I think it's powerful. That's awesome. That's really awesome, all the stuff you're doing. I don't know how you do it, because that's a lot of, and I'm worried about my bandwidth now just with my handful of things I work on, but that's super exciting. I think we're kind of running out of time here, but I'm glad we went into this. I'm glad I got up here. If you kind of leave something, with people, I would say, because this is from my perspective, it looks like it's a long battle, right? And it's this battle, I don't want to say battle, but it's a conversation, right? And there's a lot of conversations that would need to happen for this to come to fruition. But what would you suggest for people out here? Because there's people listening that is it a political environment? Is it just really awareness? What's something that other people could be doing to help this cause if they believe in decentralization? Government may have too many hands, or just businesses in general have too much control and hands into our personal lives.
First off, I would just plead with people to be honest about what's really going on, and open your eyes, open your hearts, and have a voice. And it's like, well, I don't know what to say. Like, we do this Digital World Town Hall meeting every Tuesday, and we have people that show up and they're like, I just want this to become real. I want this to implement. And it starts with us as an individual, just like Michael Jackson talked about. It's all about the individual saying, you know what, I'll give up that Apple phone and I'll actually start taking control of my life again. I can use all the same apps that I was using before, and go buy a ClearPhone. Or in our world, we build these ClearPhones for that type of thing. But I don't want this to be a sales pitch, because it's not what it is. Even if it's just stay on your Apple phone, but start learning about, do you really have to register, license, and permit in certain jurisdictions?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, as an American, you're actually free to do whatever you want to do. That's been constitutionally validated. Like, there's people in this state that said, I'm not going to drive with a license plate because I don't have to have one, because you're just tracking and surveilling me. And there's people in this state that are dead now because of it. And if we all come together and we use systems that actually give them better abilities to do their tracking, but on terms that are private, I mean,
it's a win-win for everybody.
it is. It really is. So it's use these systems, learn these systems. You know, I'm not saying riot or protest. By all means, we have sets of laws. Now, there's a legal system and a lawful system. The legal system is really a part of oppressing, because it's part of a bar association that's just like everything else. A colonial system, you push people through it. It's not necessarily a lawful system. And what I mean by that is, understand the difference between the two. We need to follow the law. We need to be law-abiding citizens of whatever country we choose to be a part of. And that's a big key. We can choose to actually be domiciled out of a different jurisdiction. And so many people they don't get that. It's like, nah, I was born in this hospital and it's in that jurisdiction. What happens in, like, for instance, you know, my great-great-grandfather, because of wars, the country he was born in is no longer the same country. So why is it we have imaginary lines where the water isn't and it's on land?
Right.
We live on an earth. You physically flew to me here, like took a couple days, but we could connect digitally just in the same way, in a similar space. We don't share, we all share oxygen on the earth, but it's not the same kind of, there's a difference, but really, is there a difference? Do we really have these borders? Do they really exist?
Some people would say, a lot of people would say so, especially today.
Yeah,
but,
and I think that what we're going to be dealing with in the future with war, I mean, some people have really seen war, and our generation really hasn't.
No.
And I think once we start understanding the bloodshed doesn't have to happen, the lives that are taken and affected doesn't have to happen, I think that we'll love one another a lot more. You look at what happened with 9/11 or even with COVID. We started loving one another a lot more, other than, you know, the division with vaccines and all that stuff. But
which, if you look back at all these different scenarios, the only division is really political.
Yeah,
right.
You're spot on. Yeah, exactly.
So it's unfortunate, but it's the world we live in, right? And I follow Gary Vaynerchuk a lot, and he talks about the world of purple. You know, everyone needs to figure out how to think purple, right?
All the colors mixed together.
Yeah. So, Michael, I appreciate it. How can people connect with you? We're going to put some stuff in the show notes. I want to put some of these screenshots, but you know, also your Tuesday Digital World. So on the Tuesday Digital World, we'll put those links in there. We'll put Michael's links. Are they able to buy a Clear phone?
Yeah, if they want to, they can just go to literally. So this is my contact information here. Anybody can ping me anytime. So if you want a Clear phone, you just go to Clear Store, and these are the simple phones here. So from $500 to $900, and then there's different models. Like, for instance, that'll actually have the Hawaiian Life built into it. Okay. And we're actually going to hook you up for flying out of here.
Love it.
Well,
appreciate it.
But, you know, so those are the ways that they can do it. I personally run this 624, wonderful phone. You know, the screen, the camera, the memory, the storage, solid, but it's private. It's you have to actually register it to use with Google, because it comes out of the box not using Google. So
I'm an advocate, man. I appreciate it. I'm loving seeing the journey, and I hope I can be a part of it. And I think it's definitely necessary in the world we're living in today, and
Austin,
where we're going.
Thank you for caring and for doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, sir.
Talk to you.
Have a good one.